All right,
All right.
let's do this.
We are officially back on Gospel Go Around. Welcome, Mr. Josh.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
I am so glad you're the first episode back.
Yeah, man, kicking it off.
Yeah, dude.
Here we go.
Man, we really haven't known each other that long. I don't think we even really hardly know each other.
No, I think maybe just a few months. What was it? Maybe October, September, perhaps?
Yeah, around there.
Yeah.
That first little introduction.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Yeah, I remember we got to talking over at Young Adults, Adults at Everlast, and yeah, I don't remember what it was, but it was just
Yeah.
something. We just we just started talking. We're like, oh yeah, okay. So
Yeah, I don't remember it either, but glad it happened.
yeah, absolutely, man. We've been, here and there, and just being able to have good conversations, and yeah, again, I'm honored that you think of me to come on here.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here to share your story and
Yeah.
comfortable with it.
Yeah.
So I thank you for that. So yeah, I suppose we'll just get right into the meat and potatoes of it.
Sure.
Where does it all start?
It all starts off long ago, 27 years
Oh.
ago. Yeah, I was born in a small town called Colorado Springs. It's not so small anymore,
Yep.
but yeah, no, born and raised here in Colorado Springs. And the interesting thing about my story is just the fact that it was something that I really had to grow to be kind of okay with.
Yeah.
When you grow up sort of in a Christian church family, you tend to, it sounds funny, but you tend to envy the more extreme stories. You have the stories where you have your friends who are coming in from this crazy background where it's some have had intense stories, but mine simple.
Yeah.
Growing up in home, and I was thankful to have both of my parents, and my dad was a very hard worker, and my mom, she loves Jesus, and so I grew up knowing a whole lot about the Bible and about Christ and stuff. And so I would say that I was born very, very blessed, but I had a very high reputation. So I was an only child,
Okay.
and I have a heavenly brother and a heavenly sister, and so as a result of, I think, that circumstance, there was a lot that kind of shaped the way that I was raised. So I was raised very, very carefully, very not wanting to step out of line, not wanting to get in trouble a lot.
And that
so,
was before you were born?
that was, so one was before, so I have an older brother, and then one right afterwards.
Okay.
And so with that kind of being the case, it was my parents were very careful with me with a lot of what I would do. So wasn't allowed to do a whole lot of, say, maybe skating or climbing. It was very much, if I was doing anything crazy, it was like hold on, don't do anything too crazy. So but with that too, my parents raised me, hey, you don't only speak when really you're spoken to, and to kind of be that respectful type of person. And so you can kind of see how this is shaping into a lot of my perspective, my perspective on the world. I don't like to get in trouble. I don't like when people get mad or have this big old conflict, if you will. So
Sure.
a lot of what I would do was essentially shaped by that fear. Okay, so but my dad, as I said, very, very hardworking. He would work at least 2 jobs while I was growing up, which was great because I was able to experience a lot of awesome blessings, a lot of great opportunities. We were able to do a lot of cool stuff, but his presence was really lacking as a result of that. So growing up unknowingly, I was really bitter towards that. And I remember just craving opportunities where I get to be with him and get to spend time with him. And I was very thankful for the times when I got to go actually to work with him too. He worked at Lowe's. He was a contract or carpenter. Did a lot of jobs like that. And so when he was there at Lowe's, I remember getting the chance. I would be there maybe from 8 a.m. till till 12.
Yeah.
And so I got to really know Lowe's like the back of my hand.
Yeah.
Kind of walk around, and then
You were how old at this point?
I was maybe about 9,
Okay.
9, 8 years old. So just familiar with that. And whenever he would come here for lunch, it was an awesome time because I got to have lunch with him for an hour.
Yeah.
And then go back, and then my mom would pick me up later on about 3 o'clock, and he would then go to his next job.
Okay.
So it was a lot of that.
Yeah.
A lot of that would happen, and so that kind of created very much a desire in me to be appreciated, but also to have that connection with somebody.
Sure.
It was a lot of that was very relevant, and so just grew up always feeling like I needed that. So there was always somebody that I was interested in.
Yeah.
every year.
Yeah.
So it was like I remember having like my first crush at like kindergarten, and it was like, this is so cool. Like, and on the last day, she like gave me like a kiss on the cheek, and I was like, oh wow, this is. I was like, this is cool. And she was like this cowgirl, right?
Yeah.
And so like I remember we all like went over to her house for her birthday party, and we like all rode a horse and stuff. And
Yeah.
that was pretty cool. So I was like, okay, yeah, and then it seemed like every year there was like somebody new, somebody different, and so that became a very big part of me. I always was into having just a relationship, able to kind of fill that void. So that was pretty much me. Maybe about born till age maybe almost middle school.
Okay.
Around that time is kind of just all of these things kind of shaping into a lot of who I am today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's see, about middle school. Entering into middle school, again with this kind of perspective of needing to be perfect, needing to be good enough. I could tell you a Bible verse. I could tell you who God was and Jesus and stuff, but I couldn't tell you if I was truly walking that out. And so there was this moment. I was actually maybe about 7, 8 years old, in children's ministry. And I remember even praying at that time, it was during worship, and I was just like, God, I want you in my heart. Just right then and there. There was no like epic altar call.
Yeah.
There was no like preacher that was like saying stuff.
Yeah.
It was literally just in the middle of worship. I was like, you know what? I hear people talking about God entering into hearts. And so I'm like, okay, Lord, enter mine. And so like from there, it kind of had like this semblance of like realness to it. But through and through, it still felt very fabricated. It still felt very inauthentic. Like I was just going through the motions of a lot of things. So we could technically say that's when I would have gotten saved. But even at that moment, I never had anybody to tell me or to walk me through with it.
Okay.
So I didn't even tell my parents at that time. So it was just, just did it.
Yeah.
And so I would even think of like, wow, like it would be so awesome to like, give messages or give things that I would read from the Word and pretend to have like those ideas. But even at that age, I remember the Lord telling me, I want you to speak my word. I want you to preach. And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm like this only child introvert. I'm like, I don't want any of that. I just want to do me.
Yeah.
And in my mind, preaching was speaking in front of like thousands of people. And I grew up in a very big church.
Yeah.
Thousands of congregants in there. So in my mind, I'm like, I got to be outgoing. I got to be loud.
Yeah.
I got to be popular, and I got to be able to speak in front of thousands of people. So I'm like, nah, that's not for me.
We can trim this part out, but was it?
It was.
I had a feeling.
It was. Yeah. So I was kind of used to that.
Yeah.
Big church stuff. So, but as I'm going through this and, having these thoughts and kind of navigating through life, I was maybe about 12 years old. This is why I'm so passionate against it right now. But I was 12 years old when I had discovered pornography. As a matter of fact, that was the one like sin that really like took a hold. I was never really a liar. I wasn't stealing anything, But again, with that desire for a relationship, and ultimately what was kind of turning into um, this desire to fulfill that in my heart, was actually kind of being satisfied through that act, through watching porn.
Right.
And it was kind of, it wasn't even intentional. Like I didn't even, and most of the time it isn't.
Right.
I remember there was like this channel on the TV, and I was watching a movie. I was just watching a regular movie, and then it ended, and then something else came on, and I was like, whoa. Like I never really witnessed this before. This was something that was insane. And when you do something wrong, or it's not right, and you're like, well, that was really weird. I don't know how to take that, but deep down inside it wasn't
Right.
what it was supposed to be. So that had happened, and I was like, okay, well, I experienced it. I'm done, as it always is with addictions. And the next night, I was like, well, I wonder what's going to come on this time, and so on and so forth. It was getting to be every night, and it was perfect because it was so late that my parents weren't awake. Dad was always working, so I don't think he really cared. And my mom, she was just doing her thing. So, yeah, there I was, just doing that. But meanwhile, as I'm like, here during the day, I would wake up just feeling beat up. I was like, this ain't right. This is something I'm not supposed to be doing. And I know it's something I'm not supposed to be doing. So through that, I am feeling different.
Yeah.
A lower self-esteem, if you will. Even more of an isolation, more than just a typical like introverted person. But also one who would get kind of angry often, and even a bit more just beating myself up.
Sure.
And so prior to when I was saying, like how I have this standard in my over my head, or at least that I put over myself, I have this yearning for something that's filling it. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm getting it here, and I'm just kind of moving along and telling myself every day that this is kind of the last time I'm going to do it.
Right.
But because of that standard, there becomes this expectation of being perfect.
Sure.
And living up to it. So by day, when I would talk to my friends, I'd talk to my parents, talk to people that I knew, and I would even hear from like my mom, hear from like people, oh, Josh is such a good kid. He's going he's going to church. He's involved in youth group, and then how they essentially just raised me the right way. And so I'm here hearing those words, but yet feeling like a hypocrite in the background. So because of that harshness that ultimately I was really kind of putting on myself, really just made me think so incredible, just depressing thoughts. Like, man, I hate myself, or it would be better if I just wasn't, around, so I wouldn't have to disappoint them if they did find out, so I would have those thoughts that were going around. And there was this one night after about a year of just being consistently doing that. I remember having like this.
This is around 13?
Around 13, almost 14 years old. And I'm at youth group, and I confessed this to a leader. Okay, so after the first time, I really felt like I was able to be open and vulnerable with them. So I told them, they prayed with me. Feeling super confident in myself. I'm like, okay, yeah, I prayed about it, I confessed, and so now I'm good. But as soon as I get home, boom, I start doing it again, and it seems like this time it's getting a little bit harder to overcome now. So I'm like, okay, what happened? I thought this was it. I thought you had done something. So through that, and again with this darker thoughts going on through my head, really started to make me wonder, like, if he was even like real, if he was even like who he says he is.
Sure.
Because I'm thinking, if he is such a good God, then, well, he wouldn't let us do this. He wouldn't let me do this, or I wouldn't be feeling like this. And then I had this thought that says, well, if my dad wasn't working so much, then I wouldn't be in this mess. And so therefore I started to really have this disdain for him too.
Sure.
Have that. I started having this disdain for the perfection I felt on my head. So I'm like, okay, well, this is my mom's fault. So I'm blaming other people other than myself. And
Right.
as I was going through that, just had this thought that kind of came to my head. Well, it was as I was praying to the Lord, I felt, okay, if you are who you say you are, and you're a God who sets people free, you're a God who does all of these things I'm hearing at youth group, you truly love me, then you'll break me out of this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would tell him that, and I would tell him that for weeks. Like, okay, break me out of it. Do what you want to do. And so he did. He did in a very embarrassing way, I can even say. Yeah, you could probably even have this idea of what was going to happen. So it was that night, going and doing my thing,
Mm-hmm.
and guess who walks in as I'm there. So my mom walks in on me in the act of watching porn, and man, I tell you, there was never that amount of like shame and embarrassment and just ultimately like crap.
Yeah.
I got caught and I messed up, and so God answered it in a way that was not how I thought it would.
Yeah.
But he did. And so um when you're like 13, 14, you're like, gosh, now what is she going to think of me now? Like, what's she going to think of her son, who was called like this good kid, who was doing all the right things, and that she was doing all the right things, and yet I'm here doing this in the background. And she she started to kind of tear up and get emotional. And I remember these words specifically. She was like, I never wanted this for you. I never wanted this to be your battle. And she sat me down, and I'm thinking, I'm embarrassed. I don't want to show her my face. And she actually tells me, and she says that Christ died for people who are in sin, people who were separated from Him, and that it is possible to experience freedom through Him. And when He rose from the grave, and when He ascended into heaven, and all that, He made a way for us to experience that victory.
Right.
She says, in John, it talks about how we will go through trials and we go through tribulation, but to fear not, right? For He has overcome the world. And then she said these words to me, and I'll never forget it. She says, and so Jesus died for you, and it's possible for you to be free. And I'm going to fight this with you, she had told me. And that's when I had broken down right there. And I was like, man, when I thought she was going to be, like disown me, she's going to turn me away. She's like, you're a disappointment, you're not my son, all those thoughts that kind of come to your head. It was really just, in fact, the kindness. It was her kindness that led me to repent. And I think about that scripture where it talks about, God's kindness is meant to lead us to repentance. Judgment can be powerful, and we can fear that consequence. But when we see how it's actually God's love and it's His kindness, then we get to experience, wow, this is life. This is freedom. I can live again. So yeah, there was that battle, and continually, battling and facing against temptations through it all. But I learned then the value of the fight that Jesus gives us. How He equips us to be able to fight what the enemy tries to throw at us. And so it was through that I'm like, okay, Lord, you came through, and you used my mom for it. And so I would then get baptized at the church we were going to at the time, and immediately just serving was the next thing that I desired to do.
Yeah.
The first time I ever served, shortly after that, was actually this thing called the Back to School Bash, which was where we assemble a whole bunch of backpacks and food and have this whole drive for people to just get school supplies. You know? So we were giving back to the community, and nobody even had said anything. You know, my parents didn't say anything, but I just told them, I was like, you know, I think we should serve in this.
Yeah.
And so you're like, okay, yeah, we will. So we had started doing that. I got to meet so many people there, got to know the youth pastor at the time, and just really getting into the community that was there at the church. And I loved it. I loved being a part of all of that. I loved being a part of the church, serving. And I realized today that it was really actually fulfilling a purpose that all of us have been created, right? We've been created to worship someone, something. And when we do that, one of the things that he tells us to do, obviously, is to love others,
right?
To serve with each other. And so fulfilling a bit of a purpose behind all of that. And so this is kind of getting into high school, you know, the awkward years of middle school kind of passing, and obviously still some of the lingering effects of what I desired in the past, such as, you know, just relationship and always having somebody with me. And so that was still always a constant thing, but I was still relatively like on the right track now. And so come maybe about a year or two later, so I'm like 15 here, 15, 16. I my youth group, which I loved. This is one of the biggest reasons why I love youth ministry today. Those friends that I had gotten to know while serving became some of my friends even to today that I know of. And you know, we're there, and that's where I really began to develop stronger friendships and relationships with people. And they offered this thing called student leadership. And so I'm like, okay. You know, hearing about it and initially kind of hesitant. I'm like, you know, what is this, you know, really about? But really, it was just giving us an opportunity to learn, to lead and to serve, to be more involved with the youth ministry. And I'm like, I love this. I love youth ministry, so I'm going to go ahead and go for it. And from there, I have some of the best memories that I can think of. You know, I remember one time we'd done the incline, right? We did the incline, and they had to give us all these backpacks and full of water, right? So we're carrying that up here, and I'm making it up. It's maybe about 500 steps, and you know, if you've ever been on the incline before,
but I want to.
It's just crazy, bro. So don't carry water when you're going up that. But if you do, you could drink the water.
Right.
I didn't realize that. It was maybe about 500, 700 steps going up there, and then my friend Chris, he looks at me, he's like, "Bro, why don't we just start drinking the water?" I'm like, you're right. And so we started drinking it, and obviously it's making it lighter as we're going up there. Still a huge mistake later on because we drank all that water. And so we're like, you know, we're torturing ourselves in that matter. And so we had that whole experience. It really taught us, you know, teamwork. Taught us about, you know, doing things together. And so I built a lot of awesome bonds with them. But it was through that God began to teach me about leading. And about taking those steps to trust him with opportunities. And so my first opportunity that I got to really kind of speak in front of people, I had two opportunities. The first one was actually on this mission trip that we had gone to Jacksonville, Florida.
Oh, what?
And in Jacksonville, we helped out a sister church that was down there, teamed up with their youth group. Again, awesome experience while we were down there. And the first one is I actually got to do worship. It was actually in public. It was like in this park.
Oh, wow.
And this dude, he was like playing like this drum, like, you know, like this big old drum.
Oh, the chest drum.
The chest drum. He's like boom, boom, boom. He had that whole thing out there, and you know, I got to play guitar, and so we were singing, doing a lot of that, and you know, sharing our stories and our testimonies with the homeless. It was a homeless outreach that we were doing. Awesome. So I really got to practice, you know, sharing my testimony, sharing just my faith with other people, worshiping. And then while we were out there, I got to kind of give like a little devo, and kind of my experience from the whole thing. And my youth pastor tells me, I want you to go up there. He like comes up and brings up me. He's like, hey, I want you to give like a message. And I'm like, why me?
Yeah.
I'm like, why do you want me to do this? And he's like, well, I just feel like the Holy Spirit wanted you to do it. I'm like, at the time, I'm like, that's not a reason. I'm like, so you have this thought, and I'm like, how do you know it's really him? So,
Right.
went up there, and I'm like in front of like all these people in the community. I'm like shaking. I'm like having to share, my story, the experience up there, and it was rough.
Yeah.
Never really spoken before, but had a lot of people confirm. He's like, yeah, you did good. Spoke to me. And I'm like, okay, this is awesome. This is great.
Right.
And yeah, so God really taught me just about trusting Him in those experiences. And little did I know, was He really like leading me towards something like in the future, for what I'm actually going to be doing. But at that time, I'm like, okay, well, just one and done, one and done deal.
Right.
Come back, and again, my youth pastor's like, I want you to tell the youth group about what had happened. And I'm like, again, like what again?
Yeah.
To tell you all these things. I don't even know what to say. So he sat me down, and we had prayed, and read in the Word, and gave me a little bit of confidence, and came back and talked about the experience, and I actually used the story where Jesus is talking about the farmer who spread the seeds.
Yeah.
And I was like, I was feeling really down that nobody really came to know the Lord, but we had gone and we had sown seeds. We had told people about Christ, and so applying it to other people, and again, a lot of people are like, oh, thanks for sharing that. That really affirmed, really encouraged me. And so here and there, I would give like little devos like that, and my youth pastor would really give me opportunities to do all of those things. Again, always wondering like, why am I doing this? And so there came a point. Those were great. I was held back for 1 year, and so I got to have kind of an extra year in the youth group, and I looked older than I actually was, so I kind of snuck into the high school ministry when I was actually like 13. So because a lot of my friends were actually older than me too, so I snuck in, was there, so I got to experience a little bit more than the average person in youth group. And so I was there for about 3 years, and then my family goes to another church. So I'm like, okay. I don't feel called to do that. I was like, no, these are my friends. This is where I'm at. This is my community. I'm not about to do this. And so I stayed there. This is before I got my license, mind you. So this was kind of like this back and forth type of trip that we were doing. And eventually it kind of came to this point where I had this thought that was like, well, I should be going with the rest of my family, and I shouldn't be kind of dividing it and making it kind of just harder on everybody. So I went and started going to the church that I'm at right now. Now it's interesting because when I was there, maybe going for a few months to the church, I wasn't involved in the youth group because the other youth group was my community. I didn't want any part in this one. And the youth pastor consistently, talking to me, he's like, hey, Josh, I want you to come. His name was Josh too. So he's like, I want you to come check it out. Come hang out with us. I'm like, yeah, giving him like the okay, but not, like type of deal. And the one night that I did, we were meeting on Mondays for kind of a strange youth group night. I go on a Monday, and he comes up to me. He's like, dude, I'm so glad you're here, but it's my last night. And I'm like, all right, so this is kind of funny timing. I'm over here, and it's your last night, and I'm like the new person, so I have no idea who anybody is. And once again, with relationships in my heart, I'm like, oh, there's a lot of cute people over here too, cute girls over here. And I'm like, so maybe started talking to one and kind of striking it up with her. And so thinking that was kind of like my purpose. I'm like, wow, Lord, so you led me here so I could date this one girl. That was kind of my whole thing. And I'm ashamed that I'm like that. Was like my reasoning, but I'm like, okay, God, this is what I'm going to be with. So I started going there for a while and started attending their student leadership. And me and this one girl that I had thought was meant to be with, we had broken up, and she had written a little letter to me. I remember, she gave it to me, and I was like, what?
Yeah.
What is this?
And this is still around 15,
It's
16?
around 15, 16. Still,
Yeah.
all of this stuff is happening, approaching 17.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well, she was the reason why I was here, so I'm just gonna stop. I'm gonna ditch it. I'm like, I don't want to be here, and I didn't connect with the new leader.
Right.
I was there in the youth group, so I'm like, okay, well, I'm just gonna go ahead and do this all on my own. And Lord introduced. This is my senior year now, so 17 to 18. The Lord brought in the youth pastor that I currently look up to today, that I still reach out to here and there. And I'll never forget the day that I started talking to him. So during high school, I had much longer hair. It was like here. It was like almost down to the middle of my back even.
Oh, wow.
And so, I'm there, and the youth pastor at the time, he's like, hey dude, yeah, I used to have long hair too. And so started really connecting, and we actually connected on like on music. So he played in a metal band, and I'm like, yeah, I like metal too. So we're bonding over that, and he's like, dude, I wanna hang out with you. Let's come over here and play some basketball. So I'm like, okay, dude, I love basketball. So you come over here and play. And he just really made me feel seen. Really made me feel understood and heard. And so really created like this awesome bond. The entire youth group just became so like relational.
Yeah.
It was just all about being with each other. It was all about the word. It was all about identity, really, at the end of the day. And that was a foreign concept to me. I had never understood what identity truly meant. Initially, and I think a lot of people tend to think that identity is really just, how you were, what you look like, or even how you're feeling. Identity can be like what you're doing in this present moment, right? And so that's kind of my idea of what identity was. But he taught me this one statement that says, who you are is not what you do, but what you do is from who you are. So I'm like, what do you mean by that? He's like, when you recognize who you are in Jesus, that ultimately shapes and shifts how you live your life, right? A.W. Tozer talks about how our perspective of God dictates how we then live, right? And so if we view God as this judgmental God, then we're probably going to live in like this fear, if you will, right? We're going to be afraid of misstepping. If we view him as this absolutely loving God, then we're going to be kind of careless. And so having this right perspective of who God is then shapes, well, God died for me, so therefore I'm his son. Where it says that since, again, we can overcome, right? So now I know I'm an overcomer. The Bible talks about how we share in the inheritance with him. And so through all these things, I started to notice and value, wow, now I know because I am loved by my God. I don't have to be like afraid anymore. I don't have to let fear run my life. I don't have to let anxiety. I don't have to let depression run my life. I can always run to him. And even when that does arise, I can still hold on to him, and he's going to walk me through the journey. And so that aspect really became probably one of the most instrumental in my life. The Lord really used in that one short year, just that whole experience. And so again, developing awesome friendships and relationships there. I'm approaching senior year, I'm in senior year, but I'm approaching graduation. And there's this group, there's a leadership institute that just takes people who graduate into 20 somethings and just does all of these adventures. They go canyoneering, they'll go rappelling, they'll climb mountains, they'll go backpacking.
That's crazy.
And they're all about identity, and my youth pastor had done that. And so I'm like, okay, this seems pretty legit, but pretty radical. Now, what we have to understand too about this thing is, they came to our church and they do like this gospel presentation where they stand up here and there and will give like a spoken word version of their story or of something that they would go through. And it was huge. You have like this one person, I remember he was sitting around me and he had like this big old mustache. He had a mustache and he had dreadlocks. A West type mustache. And his and he had dreads, right? And so in my mind, I'm like, dang, like this is a group for like hippies almost, you know. I'm like, you know, this is kind of like this radical place, and you know, they're staying up and they're like, and at the end of every one of their statements, they said, I know my God and I know who I am.
Mm.
And that would speak to me. Um, and they would give like these opportunities to go and check them out. And so
Mm-hmm.
every Tuesday night they would have a worship night, and I would go. And I had never been a part of a worship night or a gathering where you just completely felt loved by everybody, but like you belonged to like a family.
Mm.
And so while you were there, it was like, wow, like worship is powerful. You know, we're praying for our community, we're praying for people we know. And then they were talking about how there was this weekend coming up that they call Preview.
Mm.
And Preview weekend is where you could come in just about just a certain amount of money and just experience what it's like. And so all of my friends were doing it. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
there was like 7 of us in this friend group here. You know, all 6 of them were going to it, and you know, my youth pastor's like, yeah, go check it out. Take a step of faith. You know, go for it. So I'm like, okay, you know, I don't know, maybe talk to one of the leaders there, and they're like, okay, well, you know what, we just want you to just come. Like, you don't even have to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
Just come and be a part of it and experience what it's like.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, hesitantly, I'm going for it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's approaching it. It's on the day of. It's a Saturday. It's a Friday, and I decide not to go, like on that day.
Mm.
And I'm like, no, this isn't for me. I think really, you know, kind of fear was holding me back, just kind of the fear of the unknown and the radicalness of it. And I'm like, I just don't feel called to do that. That was my excuse. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
feel called to do it. And they're calling me, dude.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're like, hey man, like where are you at? You know, we're starting. Like, you on your way? And I'm just no showing, and
Yeah.
I'm ignoring every single one of these calls.
Hmm.
So you know, and I'm like shamefully going to the youth group on Sunday, and
Yeah.
my youth pastor's like, oh, I thought you were going to be there, and I'm like, no, just decided not to. And everybody's telling me, oh, this was such an awesome experience. We
Yeah.
loved it. We did all these cool things, and I'm like, dang it, you know, I missed out.
So why didn't you want to go? Was it just like a last minute, like, I don't really feel like it, or what?
You know, I think through it all, some of it just felt like I was being, I don't want to say forced to do it, but it was because everybody else was going to do it, and really at the heart of it, I was kind of afraid of what would happen, like what I would experience there, and
Sure.
just I didn't really know them, so I'm like, I just didn't want to be a part of that. And so really it was a lot of fear
Sure.
kind of behind that, and I knew that they would, excuse me, I'm gonna cut that out.
It's all good.
I knew that they do a lot of extreme, like, you know, they do a lot of heights. I
Yeah.
don't like heights.
Oh, okay.
I hate being on ladders.
Yeah.
I hate being on a bunk bed even.
Really?
Yeah, so I fell when I was like 3 years old. I fell from a bunk bed, and you know, I was climbing on the ladder, and one of my cousins, you know, pulled me down, and we all fell. And my cousin's like much bigger dude, so
Ooh.
I fell from the ladder, shattered like my elbow, my arm, and stuff. So I'm like all broken
Oh, man.
here. So that's kind of in the back of my mind. I just don't like that feeling of falling.
Yeah.
Roller coasters are a big no-no for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I cannot stand even that feeling.
Right.
So I'm like, they're probably going to make me like jump off a cliff is basically what I'm thinking about this group. So yeah, I just did a no show.
Yeah.
And so this is, you know, we're fast forwarding. Okay, so this was kind of like the fall, senior year, and then spring, almost
Yeah.
there to graduate. Have a couple months left, and we go on this winter retreat. Our church puts it on, and you know, it's great. Again, kind of to be one of the student leaders, if you will, being able to lead the middle school group. And there was this one night where Rev.5 is what they're called. They came and they gave that same presentation, and the topic of it was about Joshua, who in the midst of a battle, you know, calls upon the Lord, and the Lord holds the sun standing still. And it's about how through that, he not only fights our battles, right? But as the sun is standing still, it means that there's always an opportunity, right, to run to him. That he's always going to be there, and so hearing all of their stories and all of their testimonies, I started having this thought in my mind that said, "I want you to be a part of this. I
Mm.
want you to do this." So I'm like, okay. And the reason why is because what they were doing is sharing identity in Christ to other people.
Right.
And as a result of that, as we all know, you discover all these things, purpose and living 100% for Him.
Mm-hmm.
And that right there, I started feeling a call that says, okay, he's telling me he wants me to live for him. He wants me to chase after him because he wants to do huge things.
Right.
So I'm like, okay. So I had this thought, and they prayed for me, and I called them up the next week later, and was like, you know what, I want to do it. I
Yeah.
want to do the full thing, and told people, and the Lord provided for it, and I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to go ahead and apply.
Mm.
Maybe if I apply, if the Lord really doesn't want me there, then they'll say no.
Mm-hmm.
But they call me and they're like, hey, we prayed about it, and we want you in there. So I'm like, okay, Lord, if you want me there, then you're going to provide for it.
Mm-hmm.
The program itself was $10,000,
Oh wow.
and I had saved up a little bit. I had a great job, and people donated, people gave,
Mm.
and right before I had to go and move in to the campus, somebody had paid the right amount for what I needed. So I'm like, okay, Lord,
Wow.
yeah, then I guess I'm going.
Yeah.
And right before my interview for the school, one of them was like, you know what? You were the one who ignored our calls, didn't you? And I was like,
Oh man.
yep. I was like, yeah, this is that's me.
Yeah.
And so, I told her why. I told her all those things, and she's like, well, things happen for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And so she had let me in, and through it all, it wasn't even a thought. The heights, everything wasn't
Yeah.
even an afterthought. So moved in, and for 9 months was a part of this school,
Yeah.
part of this leadership institute. So I learned a lot about leadership, learned a lot about studying the word, learned all about communication,
Mm-hmm.
learned a lot of aspects of identity, and just ultimately taking that time away to really just seek the Lord,
Right.
just really spend time with Him. And so you remove yourself from culture, and you begin to kind of shift your worldview, if you will, and kind
Mm-hmm.
of critically think
Right.
about things. And so taking that moment, now going into it, I excelled in biology in high school.
Okay.
I did really well in biology, and obviously I love to play music. I love to play guitar.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, I just want to do something with music or in the medical field.
Right.
And so I'm like, okay, Lord, well, I'm going to kind of make this into a little bit of a Christian sounding desire. So I want to do like, surgery for missions, do missionary surgery, or, do some good out there. And so that was kind of what I was working towards. And that's what my goal in that time. And there came a point where we kind of sat down, and we were like, okay, what Lord, what do you say about us? And ultimately, like what do you want us to do? What do you want me to do?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm seeking the Lord in this, and I'm praying, and we take a moment to kind of fast
Mm-hmm.
during that. And during that time, I think while you're fasting too, you're not eating, so you getting kind of angry at times.
Mm-hmm.
And so had this moment where I just really disagreed with somebody, and I drove off and was kind of on my own, meditating and just speaking to the Lord. I'm like, okay, God, like, I'm frustrated here. I don't know, what do you want me to do? And just had this thought that said, well, call your dad. And so
Hmm.
I'm like, okay. And now this is interesting, given the fact that, he's been so, here and there, and again, having that thought of like, oh, my dad doesn't really, he's too busy, essentially. And so
Mm-hmm.
when I called him, we start talking, we start, sharing. I started sharing with him the experiences, things that we're going through. And he mentions during that, he's like, well, you're really good with youth.
Mm-hmm.
You said you're really good with high schoolers and you're really good with middle schoolers. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. And give some context here. I did have like this thought that I was going to go back to the youth group as a leader.
Yeah.
Just somebody who wants to give back because I loved it. He says, and you love the youth group, and you have a lot of wisdom about you. So, all these things we're connecting and clicking. He's like, you have a passion for identity. You have a passion for people knowing the Lord. He says, people confide in you, and you get aspects that the word says that a lot of people don't see. He says, and you're really gifted at sharing that. And so through all of those little encouragements and affirmations, I believe the Lord was kind of like showing me, I'm like, okay. And it was like an instant 180.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I want to give back to the
Mm-hmm.
youth and I want to pour into them. And youth ministry was becoming more and more appealing.
Right.
And music and medical, as much as of a passion, as much as I loved it, started becoming less and less of a thing like, okay, I want you to look this direction.
Yeah.
So I tell my youth pastor, I'm like, as soon as I'm done here, I'm all in.
Yeah.
I'm going to start serving. Anytime that I'm here, I'm going to be here on Sundays. And I was, we were going on a lot of trips, going on a lot of awesome opportunities and tour throughout the United States, sharing the gospel and the things that they had done. But whenever I was there on Sunday, I was serving, even at that time, as busy as I was. And so I'm just really going 100% into it. Now, the funny thing about what God does, even through experiences of trusting in Him, He leads us to do things that are kind of uncomfortable at times. So, right before these 9 months are up, we take a trip down to Utah, Moab, Utah, and if being around the community for a while, I already knew what that was about. And I'm like, this is not going to be good. Right. So we had taken already a couple experiences where we would, climb some mountains, and that on itself was stretching.
Yeah.
But this one experience, we were going to Moab just to rappel. Okay. Now, this was the moment that I was aching. I was not looking forward to this. And in fact, on the way there, I'm like the entire like 9 hours, my stomach was just not feeling it.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is something that I'm going to be sick on, and I'm trying to figure out like how I can like strategically like not do this. Like maybe I can like fake myself out enough to where I'm like getting sick. So where I'm like, you know what, I'm just not feeling it, and like figuring out how I can like make myself just not feeling it. And so I we get there, and it's a couple days that we're just camping, we're hiking, and on that third day it's time to like head back up to the top of this rock. Now the rock in itself was maybe about 500 feet, which when I say it like that doesn't seem so high.
Yeah.
When you're up there, it definitely is.
Right.
So I don't know if you've ever been rappelling before, but when you're up there, you have this helmet, you have these gloves, and you put on this harness.
Yeah.
Now, to describe this harness, it's how can I describe it? So think of like when you're putting on shorts.
Yep.
Right. But it's just the straps. Okay. So it puts it on, and you put it all over your waist, and it's kind of giving you a wedgie. So it's very uncomfortable.
Yeah. I mean, I'm familiar with construction harnesses, so they're a little different, but about the same thing.
Exactly.
Mine, it's like a belt that you got to bring up around and pull across your leg, and it's the wedgie type thing, and all up and over your shoulders and whatnot. But
yeah. So it's exactly like that. And it comes to be my turn, and a couple of the other people who were there, one was like starting to cry because he was so high up there, and I'm like trying to be the man. I'm like trying to be the strong and tough one.
Yeah.
Now, I'm a lefty. Okay,
Okay.
and so when you go down on this rope, I'm going to go ahead and use this as like this little example here.
Sure.
You have like this part of the rope that you're supposed to put into the loop, right?
Okay.
Now, the hand that you go down when you rappel is the hand that's gonna give you your break, right? So if you're a righty, it's going to be underneath you, and you're going to like squeeze whenever you have to stop and let go whenever you want to go down. Okay.
Now, this is a mechanism or the actual rope that you're just cinching up on?
So this is the rope. This is the
Okay.
actual ropes. You wear these gloves so it doesn't like give you like this burn.
Right.
But as you're going down there, and there are people, mind you, like on the bottom who are kind of like doing like this thing that you call the fireman's belay, which is where they're holding on to kind of like as a safeguard so you don't like fall even if you like let go.
Right.
So the hard part is obviously just getting over that mindset.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, I don't want to make this too complicated for the instructor. So I'm just going to go down with my right hand. Okay. Again, I'm not a righty. So
Right.
I'm like, you have to back up when you were going off of this cliff, essentially.
Yeah.
And when you look at it from a distance, the way this rock kind of looks is it looks like the rock from The Lion King, right?
Okay.
Where it's like you have like this area right up here, and it's like sticking out. The elbow is like where that little point is. You're not going down a wall. That's the difference between
Okay, so you're underneath that cliff.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Exactly. And what you have to do is as you're walking backwards, you have to almost kind of be a little upside down.
Yeah.
As you're going to it. So you're looking up. And then you let go. And it's this moment of where you have to really lean back. You're sitting down, you understand. So you have to lean into the rope. And I take a step, and boom, I go down. But that first initial just being upside down just psyched me out.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, dude, no, this is the worst. And so I let go, because I'm thinking I have to let go. So boom, I start letting go. And I maybe dropped. They weren't expecting it. It was kind of really crazy. So I dropped maybe it was really 5 feet. Okay.
Yeah.
But that 5 feet just instantly, oh gosh, this is the worst. This is the worst feeling. So I'm hanging there. Holding on tightly, and because it's my other hand, it's starting to throb, and it's starting to really cramp, and I'm like, I can't hold on to this anymore. Yeah. I'm so intense, and I'm not leaning back. I'm leaning too forward. When you lean too forward, when you're rappelling, you go forward. So it's a possibility of me going upside down. But really, what happened was I was still close enough to that little edge. And so when I had let go and leaned forward, hit me right there, smack dab in the middle of the face. Hit my helmet. My glasses are all like this.
Yeah.
I'm starting to panic, and I'm like, okay, there goes all of my manliness. There goes all of my strength. I'm like feeling like I'm about to like tear up here. It's like the worst. And then, in the midst of all my hyperventilating, the person that was going down with me, it's kind of like in that movie where you hear the echo on the side of your ear. And, finally I hear him, he's snapping his fingers, trying to get my attention. I look at him and he's like, Josh, like, look at me. He's like, you're going to be okay. He's like, just breathe. He says to breathe. He says to lean in to the harness, lean into the harness, trust the rope, and relax. He's like, you're going to be okay. So I take a moment, I start breathing, and I'm leaning into it. I'm there, and he gets my attention. He goes, okay, turn around. Like, you kind of turn around a little bit, and I can see a whole bunch of like canyons, and I see the trees, and I see the river, the creek that's going through, and I see the sun. I feel the breeze, and he's like, you're not going down alone. Like, I'm right here with you. He's like, trust in the harness.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay. And so I start going down slowly. I'm like inching here and there, getting down there. I make it down to the very bottom. My legs are shaky. My arm feels like it's going boom, 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 doing that whole thing. And he's like, you did it. He gives me a hug and stuff. And at that moment, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I had done that. And, I started walking, and again, one of the other leaders was like, "Hey, Josh, you want to do it again?" I'm like, "Nope." Nope. I went to my tent and just stayed in there.
Yeah.
But through that experience, God had taught me, because I'm all the way up there, and I'm thinking, okay, I can do this in my own strength. I'm going to make it easier on them, make it more convenient. And, again, kind of puffing myself up. I'm not going to cry like these other people are. And the one moment when it gets uncomfortable and it became unfamiliar and I started dangling there, was the moment I was like, okay, I can't do this. I don't have the strength. And through that, God really said, okay, you're not going to know, he's there. You can't feel him.
Right.
We can't see him. It's like that rope. And you can go through an experience and you're getting that wedgie, if you will. But when you lean into that, you lean into him, you trust that rope, he's going to hold you.
Right.
And you're not going to go down that cliff alone. You're going to go down with him. He's going to be with you. And so God really taught me that significant part that's always hung around with me ever since that experience, pun intended, hung around.
Right.
So we had another opportunity a few weeks later to go, this time to Zion, Utah.
Yeah.
And same thing.
Love Zion.
But this time, it's so beautiful. Love it. And we're up there, and we're going to hit this time about 4 different canyons. So I already know what's coming up. I'm like, okay. I'm saying, screw it. I'm going to make it as difficult as possible for them. I don't care how hard it is. I'm just going to go down with my left hand. I'm like, okay, just not complicate things. And so again, he takes his little rope here. I'm just going to go ahead and show you. And really what he does, I tell him, okay, I'm a lefty, by the way. I don't know how hard it's going to be. He says, okay. And he just takes the left side of the rope. He just goes, whoop, flips it over to the right hand, and he puts it into the loop. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me.
Oh, man.
I could have probably saved myself all that trouble.
Yeah.
If I would have just said, right off the bat.
Yeah.
And so with that little bit of confidence in there and taking it slower, he even told me, he's like, oh yeah, I don't like heights either, but he doesn't let that stop him. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to do it. And with the next few rappels after that, I was just facing it 100%, and ended up really loving it, and I'm really enjoying it, and having fun with the thrill, because I always remembered, lean into the harness, lean into it, trust the rope. So I'm like, okay, so I would do that, and God led me through an awesome adventure through that, awesome experiences with all of those times, feeling like Spider-Man as you're going through all the canyons, and it was really right then and there that the Lord's like, see.
Yeah.
When you trust me, may not be easier, but you begin to see in the aftermath the stuff and the journey that you went through. So that, man, about 19, all of those experiences, but with all of the life lessons I learned, the principles that I had gained, leading me to where I'm at today, and eventually it goes into serving there in the church. But God really used that entire experience to just show me so many things about leaning into and trusting him even when it gets difficult. Oh, all right.
Yeah. Okay, so where'd we leave off?
Just after
Zion Canyon.
Canyon, yeah. So okay,
was it Zion Canyon or
Zion Canyon?
Just in Zion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Zion Canyon. It was a few other ones too. I think there was one called Angel's Landing was another one. Let's see. There's a few of them. Can't remember at the top of my head. There was this really cool one too, where you go down, and it was like this. It's like this giant hole. It's a really famous one. And as you're coming down, there's like this little pool that you can rappel into. So you have to wear a suit and stuff too. So as you're going down, you land right into the pool, and you can swim in there too. Because Utah's hot.
Yeah.
So that was feeling really cool. So those are some of the ones that I really remember, and obviously many fun experiences. But yeah, dude, that was a huge part of my life.
Yeah.
Those 9 months too, really quick too.
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
Going through all that and having such a profound experience. And
yeah.
So what was it like after that, coming out of that?
Man, it was a little bit of a culture shock, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
It's not like we were separated from society, but I spent so much time with the community, and just really, doing all this traveling, going to the mountains and stuff, and coming back, you really begin to kind of analyze things a little bit differently. And so, as I was saying about how I felt like the Lord was leading me towards ministry ultimately, that kind of really gave me like this fire to really just pursue after it and to chase 100% for it. So I was serving there in the youth group about 3 days a week. So we had a Saturday night, we had a Sunday, and then we had a Tuesday, Everlast and stuff. So young adults as well too. So I was just going all in, and as we were doing all of that, we went on this summer camp. It was really cool because at the summer camp, a lot of the students that were going, there was one who was also afraid of heights. And so, my youth pastor, again, always liking the challenge, us wanting to do crazy challenges. I remember one time we had like this one game where we did like duck, duck, goose with a real egg though. And so it was like, walk around, duck, duck, like that goose.
Oh, man.
And so we'd like all run around and chase after the person. He made us like all like, we like drink like all this milk, youth group games, if you will. And we had to like spin around and like do like this like freeze tag game, which you can imagine with milk and spinning. Probably not a good recipe for anything.
Right.
But that's just how he was. He was just challenging us and doing all these crazy games. And we were going to the summer camp, and it's an adventure camp down in New Mexico. And they do rappelling. They do rappelling, and they do all these crazy, like swings and stuff. And I'm like, gosh, I got out of this program over here 9 months, and I survived. I'm like, I'm never doing this again. So I'm in here at this summer camp and as a leader, and you're like, okay, this time we're going to rappel, and you got to go down. And I'm like, dadgummit, I was like just thinking, I'm just going to be down here on the ground with everybody else who doesn't want to go up there. And then I hear about one of the students being afraid of heights, and immediately I'm like, well, I'm a leader. I feel this tug on my heart. I'm like, go talk to him, encourage him. So I go talk to him and tell him about my experience up on the rock and stuff. And he's like, oh, I don't know. Well, I'll go down if you go down with me. And I'm like, I was hoping he would not have said that.
Right.
I had a feeling he would. So I'm like, okay, I'll do it. And I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. I'm not afraid anymore. So we make it up there, and we have to, do like this little hike, and we're walking across this rickety bridge, and we make it. And so what it is it's 4 really tall trees, and you have like this platform that's kind of wrapping around these trees. There's again nothing underneath. You can't walk down. You just have to hang. And I'm again, getting ready for it, putting on all of our gear. He's going down that right next to me. And the lady, the instructor, she's like setting me all up, and she like looks at me, right? And I'm pretty tan. She goes, wow, you're really pale. She goes, are you scared right now? And I'm just like, shut up.
Yeah.
Like, no, I'm trying to be cool for this dude here.
Right.
I'm like, I'm chilling. It's all right. And we start going down. So we count down, 3, 2, 1. As soon as we say 1, boom, we jump down. And we did it. And so I'm going down, and I'm kind of like going down like step by step with him too. And I'm like, do I have to do this whole repeat thing with what I had to do? But he faced onto it. He was going all the way down, and I'm going down with him too. And they're all cheering for him. They're doing a great job. And I was like, dude, see what happens when you you have courage. You step forward and you do it. So he's like, okay. And he did it multiple times after that too. And I didn't, but he did. And so everybody else was going down, was having fun. I was playing the Mission Impossible songs. So it was like, dun, 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 dun. And so they had a huge blast with that, and really got to bond with all of the youth that were there and have fun with them. But it was during this camp that my youth pastor, or the leader really at that time, he tells me, that the Lord was leading him out. And so I'm like, oh, okay. And this came as a big shock.
Yeah.
I had no idea that was going to be happening. And I'm like, that this can't be happening. You're like the greatest youth pastor ever. What are you doing? The Lord was moving him. He's going to be pastoring and being a part of Young Life at another area. And so I'm like, I know he's going to be impacting a lot of people out there. So during that time and during that transition, it was difficult for the entire youth group. Everybody loved him, leaders and students and all. And the middle school pastor there at the time was kind of overseeing all of it. And he calls me up and he's like, "Hey, Josh, so he was transitioning to become a young adults pastor." And so yeah, the pastor, he calls me up. He's transitioning to become the young adults pastor. They had just hired a new high school pastor at that time. But he says since he is kind of stepping out, they recognize the faithfulness that I've been doing. And he says, "Well, you've been here. We recognize the calling. How would you feel about stepping in for middle school? Kind of leading that ministry?" And I'm like, wow. Initially, I'm like, okay, kind of challenged with that. I had always thought that I was going to be like the high school, pastor. That was always like the big thing for me. Middle schoolers, they're awesome, but they come with their own little challenges in themselves. And I'm like, well, okay, Lord, you seem to be opening up this door, this opportunity. I feel called to youth ministry, not really one in specific, but this is the opportunity. So prayed about it and thought, and I was like, okay, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and do it. So this was just a few months after the youth pastor had left.
Yeah.
So, okay, I'm already walking in this at 20 years old, very, very young still, learning and navigating, figuring it out. And so we had like this 3-person youth team. We had the high school guy, middle school, and another one at another campus that we had owned, that the church has owned. So, all of us working together, and it was great. The Lord was moving. I was learning again, being put in this position of having to now speak and come up with sermons every single weekend. And so and navigating that now. With that, when you step into ministry, it has its own challenges, your own navigations. One of the trials that I ran into was actually kind of these parents. We were doing this series in the youth group, and it was about relationships. And so, we're talking about that, and none of us were married. Some 21, 22, 20 years old, 19 was the other one, and so very young, and we were getting these not necessarily complaints, but just parents who were saying, these pastors are really young.
Yeah.
And they're fresh out of high school, and understandably so. At the time, it really hurt. It really sucked.
Sure.
Because we're hearing all of these kind of, criticisms about us. And so navigating that kind of the age and the experience was a very big learning curve for us to have to navigate. And so we tackled it. And so we started, going book by book, through the word, it's kind of assuring the parents, is like, hey, we're still preaching the word, we're leading here, promise you that we're just following the Spirit. Right. And so through all of those experiences, there came a point. Now, we had been doing this, COVID had just happened. Now with COVID occurring, the other campus that the church was owning, we couldn't afford to keep it going, and so we gave it to another church, and so the guy who was there, the youth guy who was there, came over to us, and so this is kind of becoming like this little bit of a conflict here, where 2 of us are leading. We kind of incorporated him into it, but he didn't really have a position there. So as they're kind of navigating and they're trying to figure out how do we incorporate three youth guys, there was a point where they had decided to talk to this other person, and they were going to put him there for overseeing middle school. And so I was going to be brought down to a lower position of just a higher impacted leader, if you will. So still kind of involved, but no longer overseeing it.
Right.
And so being 21 there, learning about that, about how difficult ministry truly is, like, okay, couple questions come into my mind. I'm like, well, Lord, I felt like you were confirming this. I felt like you were opening up doors. I felt like you were leading me to this. Like, is it here? Like, was it just me? And through that, I had a lot of people tell me, well, you're just being ambitious, or you're just kind of pursuing this for a title that you really want. And so, a lot of these thoughts were happening. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm just going to start applying to other jobs and looking around. So I applied to a few coffee shops. I love, coffee. Applied to some other just areas that I was like, okay, man, I just got to find something, to be able to do. And as I am here, I was talking to somebody, one of the pastors there right now at the church, and he sits me down and he says, well, Josh, you feel called to be a pastor, right? I'm like, yeah, I do. And he says, then you're a pastor. So it doesn't matter what other people say about you. If God has ordained it, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so, he's like, stick with it. Church is hard. Ministry is tough. But God is faithful. And so I'm like, okay. Through that, nobody was calling me back. Now, I'm not somebody who's going to just, put in an application and just kind of leave it. I'm somebody who, if I call, I'm going to keep calling until you either give me an interview or consider, me for the job. And so I put all the resumes and applied to all these places, got a few, made my phone calls, and a few of them were like, oh yeah, well, thanks for calling. Now that bumps you up to the top of the list, and we'll call you sometime in a couple of days. Never heard back, would go. And it just seemed like nothing was happening. There were no doors that were going through. And so there was this boiling point where between the three of us, there was some inside conflict between the high school pastor and another person in the church. Long story short, all of that culminated to him quitting and leaving the church. And so, being there was like, okay, well, I just told them, hey, I'm available wherever you need me. So they had their meeting, the senior pastor and all of the executives, and they came together and offered me again a full-time position, again, over middle school. Offered the other one, the high school position. And so through remaining faithful and ignoring essentially the lies that were coming through, oh, you're just doing this for a position, you're doing this because you want a title, all of those things were coming to my mind. The Lord really confirmed, listen, I have you here for a reason. And being faithful, I have this the fruit from being faithful. And so I'm like, okay. So being in that position, me and this other youth pastor, we're rocking it, and God is growing the ministry. He's working, and over a period of the time, we'd gone through summer camp, we had gone to all of these awesome activities and events that we had done. There came a point where eventually he was also getting frustrated with ministry and with the church. Now, there was a point where my age, I'm about 23, got this point here, so it's been a couple years now. He's younger than me, where he really started feeling like he was above me, and then really started to be kind of, well, I'm the high school pastor, so. And you're in the middle school, so kind of like this hierarchy, if you will. And he was going through some stuff personally and never really shared it with any of us. And once again, culmination kind of coming about to where he also leaves, but this time, feeling a lot of hurt in this one. So with that coming through, he had said a lot of things before he had left. Once again, being very accusing, once again, of just, going for the title, going for the position, that I'm not a man because of how I can feel sensitivity wise, and just very, very attacking, very, very forward, which again led me to a very dark place of like, okay, well, I am ultimately ashamed of how I am and who God created me to be. So again, a kind of a questioning of identity again.
Sure.
Because of that questioning, being in a spot of now hating who God made me to be. And a lot of those frustration, a lot of the frustrations with that, and a lot of the, again, entering into a very dark depression, that was just very unhealthy, and just a lot of dark thoughts with coming through with that. So, again, going to the pastor that encouraged me before, and he just really began speaking life into my life, and it's so important to have that one figure who's going to share the truth with you, but also is going to uplift you, is going to encourage you. And he once again continued to remind me, hey, like God is faithful. He told me his story, told me experiences that he went through, in questioning a lot of things. And he said, just keep staying the course. It's going to be all right. The Lord had brought another high school pastor to the position, and so we were working together, and it seemed like, okay, everything was going great this time. So it's time to kind of rebuild now. Mind you, this is really kind of the fourth youth pastor, high school pastor, that our youth group had seen in the last 4 years. So we have a lot of those, a lot of inconsistency. And with that, a lot of high schoolers being hurt, obviously, and leaving. So kind of building up from scratch, So as we had this, Lord put on our hearts to have this one event that started at the beginning of the year. It's called D Now. And with this event, God really just began to challenge our students, high schoolers and middle schoolers, to begin taking their faith as their own. And growing in that, we went to summer camp, had our own fun and awesome experiences with summer camp. I got to see my little cousin come to know the Lord at that one, and so we had a lot of awesome memories with that. And come about last year, our church going through a transition of just a different senior pastor coming on board and a different direction that the church is now headed towards. But a lot of that different direction comes again, this high school pastor stepping away. And so through all of this kind of unsteadiness and chaos, talk to the pastor, we come up with a plan. And eventually they had told me, well, you're going to be the guy. And you're going to oversee both middle school and high school.
Nice.
The first time this had happened, I was like, okay, I think I could kind of do this. Unknowingly, though, I wasn't ready. The Lord knew I wasn't ready yet. But through maturing and through growing in my leadership, growing in aspect of the study in the Word and who I am again, and the Lord reaffirming me in my identity. The thing is that through even that in an intense time, the Lord really began to show me, all right, now it's time to go back to basics. This is who I say you are. It's not about what other people say about you. It's not about your experiences. It's ultimately what I say that you are. And he says, and you are loved. In Exodus, when God is talking to Moses, Moses tells him, well, I'm slow of speech. I don't know how to speak. And ultimately, essentially, like choose someone else. You made a mistake. And the Bible actually says, did God says, did I make a mistake? When I formed your tongue, when I formed you, did I make a mistake? Moses is like, no. And so God told me that exact thing. He says, did I make a mistake? Like, no. I made you exactly how I intended you to be. So growing to be okay with who I am, not having to search for even relationships to have to fill my heart, and ultimately becoming okay with that. And so entering into that season of overseeing ministry, and I really felt like the Lord was saying, don't stop. Now is not the time to stop. We're going to keep going. He's like a train, and we're going to keep chugging along. So I'm like, okay, Lord, well, we've established all these things. I'm going to need a team. Like, Lord, you're going to have to provide. You're going to have to carry it. And, through it all, he has been carrying the youth group. My goal was by, 2025, really this year, to achieve 20 leaders, in the youth ministry. And we're already at 17.
Yeah.
And it's only in February.
Nice.
And so he has provided that. He's provided people who want to help, who've seen what the youth group is doing, and being a support to that, whether that's in volunteering or supporting us financially or just being a presence and just praying for us. He brought on, somebody who feels called to youth ministry that I have, just been praying for. I really feel like that the Lord has been telling me it's time to pour into people now. It's time to have that person in case if it's time for when I leave, then there won't be a hole that will be left. So the Lord has given us somebody that feels called youth ministry. We offered him an internship now. And so I have another person who's helping me out in the organization side. There's kind of a funny joke that pastors are not organized, and I am not. I'm very much a visionary, a dreamer, if you will. And so the Lord has been once again faithful in providing all of those things for us. And so I'm really stoked for what God's going to be doing with 2025, not just with my life and in the ministry. And so I guess the final thing that I can kind of, as we're coming to close to my life here already, 27 years later, as I've been growing with being okay with how the Lord has made me to be, and just being satisfied in him, that has been the biggest key. I've had a couple of experiences again where when you look for relationships, those things begin to be what you strive for, what your identity becomes focused on. And so talking to my dad a few years ago, about 2021, if you will, I remember talking to him. Finally, we were going out to eat and just sharing with him a lot of the things that I have gone through and how I wished he was there in a lot of ways. And he, expressed, he wishes that he could be there too. He's working hard. And in a moment that I didn't expect to happen, he actually began to share with me a lot of his struggles growing up and being open and vulnerable with where he was at in middle school and high school and so on and so forth. And every single one of them was something that I struggled with. And I noticed, and my dad did not have a father. His father left and his parents were divorced. And so he had that, that childhood growing up. But a lot of the stuff that he struggled with was what I did. And it was in a moment of kind of reconciliation that the Lord had brought, where it was like, wow, not only am I alone with this, but my dad does understand. He does know what I'm going through, and kind of really restored something that was really kind of broken in that moment. And so we had reconciled, forgave each other, and I believe now, my relationship with my dad, as hard of a worker as he still is, it has been repaired. And so now no longer do I feel like that bitterness towards him, but now it's been a one of gratitude and one that of admiration of, wow, my dad did that. He sacrificed a lot. Ultimately, that's what we're called to do, and that is an agape love. It's a sacrifice. And even in those moments, as tough as it is, ultimately produces the life that I was even able to have and experiences that I was able to have. So through relationships that I had, still trying to look for that one person and stuff. And so, obviously meet a couple and you think the first one is the one. It's like, it turns out not to be it. And you kind of have your other person that you meet and you're like, maybe not, but really in the end, it just wasn't the most fruitful one until I met my current now fiance today. And so, in meeting her and the Lord just using her instrumental and just, affirming and loving me, in being there for ministry, but also just being a shoulder that I know I can talk to. One of the biggest things that when we were talking, we actually had met online, and so one of the things that we were talking about here, and it's funny because when you meet online, you have your descriptions on there, and it says you're Christian. It's like do they really believe in Jesus?
Right.
Or is it just kind of cultural? I asked her, who do you say you are? Like what are some words that you would use to describe yourself? And she used one of the words, is Christian. She talks about how she was raised not just in the church, but she's a pastor's kid, and how she feels called to be in ministry. Now, mind you, this is before I even told her, well, this is what I do.
Yeah.
this is kind of where I'm at. And through then, may have different perspectives, but right there I was like, okay, I think she might be it. Kind of having that initial thought and feeling that within. So started pursuing her, and getting to the same page. And she's from Brazil. Okay, so I'm over here like, okay, yes, sweet, okay, thank you, Lord, Brazil. She works with kids, and she's actually a live-in nanny, so she takes care of them. But she lives in Denver, Arvada to be exact. So when I first met her, she was in Boulder, and so driving a couple hours all the way up there to see her was absolutely worth it, though. Having all those moments just to be able to spend time with her. And I have been dating her really till about December of 2024, so last year. Where I felt like the Lord was saying, okay, go ahead and go for it. And so I proposed to her right then and there, December 15th at 3 p.m. I remember the exact time. So, through that journey, of being faithful and open-handedly, not letting it become an identity, but saying, okay, Lord, we're laying this before your feet. And if this is where you are leading us, then we ask for you to just be blessed, bless it, and to be in the center of it. And so we've been doing the best we can to keep him in the middle, and he has been blessing it ever since. And so excited for that journey. We have our date set up for October 3rd of this year.
Oh, what?
It's going to be an interesting time. We have to wait for her. She's going to go back to Brazil for a couple months. And so we put out the time for a visa and for her to be here and stuff. And so, Lord willing, when we hear back, she's going to come back here and be able to be with us for the rest of our lives. And so, all of that stemming from, which I believe, the Lord leading me through experiences and opportunities that I've had to lead and grow up, but also trust in him and to trust in his faithfulness. And I remember Psalm 32 talks about, the faithfulness of the Lord, how it reaches beyond the clouds. And so when we look at that from here, it's like, wow, how vast it truly is. And through the hard times, through the difficult times, one thing remains the same. God is there with us through and through. And when we recognize who we are in him, everything else seems to fall into place. He has all the details. And so we have to be satisfied. John 15 talks about abiding in the vine. And it doesn't mean that we are making fruit right away. It doesn't even mean that we're figuring out our occupation or what we're to do in the future. We know we're to bear fruit. How we do that comes later on. But Jesus wants us to abide in him.
Right.
What does that mean to abide in him? Well, to rest in him, to recognize who we are in him, and to ultimately be satisfied in him. Right. And so Psalm 34 says to taste and see that the Lord is good, right? And then the word says that when we delight in him, he gives us the desires of our heart. And so it's been a journey of doing that, being okay with how God has wired me, but also trusting in him, trusting in his faithfulness, and continuing to trust in where he's leading. And so that's where we have ourselves in today.
Very, very cool.
It's always it always ends right after like the Ep.5 part. Very rarely do I ever go into like the continuation of it all, probably because it's still so very like recent.
Sure.
That's like all fresh in my mind, and so much has happened in the last like just maybe like 3 years.
Yeah.
In 3 years of my life. And so just kind of going through that. This is actually kind of really the first time that I'm like covering that portion of my life.
Hmm.
You know, because when you're talking to youth or other people, really the big highs of those moments was really when I would have initially ended, and after the repelling story. But yeah, many more coming from it, and it's so funny, and that's why Amanda laughed when you said, "Yeah, I'm like 7 years younger than you," and I'm like, she calls me her grandpa, and so and then all the youth think I'm like 35,
yeah,
and so that's why I'm like, yeah, man, daggum, so
yeah, man, that's so interesting.
yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing past that.
Hmm.
I very much appreciate that,
Absolutely.
and may God just take it and use it
Mm.
in whatever ways He wills it. And I pray that down the road, however many years, you two can both look back at this and be like, "Oh man, I remember being at that point." Through all the different aspects and ebbs and flows of life.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Absolutely.
very, very awesome of you to share and be so open about that, vulnerable about that.
I appreciate it, man. And it's as I've said in the beginning, taking the testimony of what I thought wasn't cool, or wasn't like extravagant enough, really, a story that God has done in your life, that He's written, and that He's continuing to write, is a story worth telling. So everybody has a story,
Yeah.
To tell, no matter how crazy it may have been or seemingly boring. Like the Lord can use any story for His glory. Yeah.
Yeah, that was something very much laid heavy on my heart when I started this. Was that I wouldn't say I've got a super extravagant, extraordinary testimony, but my buddy Carlos, he's got quite the story, and he's kind of how I started getting that hook sunk in and chasing God, hungering for God, and when starting the podcast got laid on my heart, I was like, okay, it doesn't matter who it is, what their background is. First things first, I'm not in it for the views. One person could watch one video, all of them, doesn't matter. That's one heart that's been reached by God, and yeah. I thank Him for that. And the second thing was, whoever I sit down with and have a conversation with, they don't have to have a crazy story. Any story of being saved by God and being loved by His grace is good enough to be shared. So I very much resonate and echo that statement for sure.
Absolutely. And I think that's such a wonderful ministry, to listen to stories and to share it, man. And then that's because I believe that Jesus, He told through stories, told parables, and when we listen to stories, we listen to testimonies. Romans 12:11, right? We overcome by the blood of the Lamb, by the word of our testimony. We cover the enemy. And so we have to have that blood of the Lamb, right? What did Jesus do?
Yeah.
And then tell the story. That's how we overcome. Yeah, man.
Yeah. Praise God, dude.
Absolutely, bro.
Well, I think that's about where it is.
Okay.
Well, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I very much appreciate it. Yeah. You mind if I pray us out?
Let's do it.
All right.
Let's do it.
Heavenly Father, thank you very much for this gathering, Lord. I thank you so much for the incredible ways that you've moved and used Josh for your glory ultimately, Lord. His story is one of very much power and relatability, I would say. And through the pride, there's humbleness. And I praise you for that. I thank you for that, Lord. And I would just like to thank you for where he is today, I look forward to seeing where you're gonna move him, um, in your ultimate plan and your will, Lord. Um, and yeah, I truly thank you for all you've done, all you are, and this time that you have blessed, Lord. And in your mighty name I pray. We pray. Amen.
Amen. All right, bro. Thank
There
you,
it
man.
is.